In the celestial world, a man is seen crossing blades with a pair of swordsmen. This is Emperor Luo Wuji. His disciple, a beautiful young woman, has been kidnapped. She's someone he holds very dear and has made many happy memories with. As he grips the pendant once gifted to him by her, Luo Wuji feels his fury at the situation rising even further. His disciple was always so loyal, so kind, so devoted to him. She showed such a pure heart and resolve towards the goal of achieving the same immortality as Luo. How dare these people try to bring harm to her? Arriving at the location the kidnappers called him to, Luo Wuji sees his disciple beaten and bloody. Bound to a tall pillar of darkness, she calls out for her master to save her. Enraged at the state she has been left in and the words of the people below, Luo rushes over. He kills several of the kidnappers present on the scene in an impressive show of speed. As he races towards his disciple, Luo steps on what is revealed to be a trap, the 10-layered array. His disciple bursts out in manic laughter as he begins to panic. It turns out that the kidnapping was a ploy from her and Luo's comrades. This is all for the sake of betraying him to steal the Emperor's scripture. As Luo stands alone, injured and weakened, he makes a decision. To stop them from gaining the power of the scripture, he blows himself up in a massive explosion stretching to the skies. The next thing Luo knows, he wakes up in the body of his younger self, from before becoming the Immortal Emperor. Looking around him, Luo sees that he's on a train. Feeling his internal energy, he realizes that his built-up energy, his cultivation is gone. Luckily, the Emperor's scripture has remained with him so he can still use some extent of his powers. He has to be careful though so the scripture doesn't run out faster than his cultivation is recovered. To do this, he'll build up his cultivation again and find the godly seeds hidden within the earth. These will allow his chi to be restored to what it should be. When he receives a call on the phone he finds in his pocket, Luo answers. A woman named Zhang Xiaoman tells him that she and her mother will be there to pick him up at the train station. She reveals his name in this past life as Luo Chen. Then, he encounters a girl and her grandfather on the train. They appear to possess a painting, which Luo recognizes as a fake and calls it out. Offended by this stranger's words, the girl attempts to smack him. Luo isn't having that though and uses one of his abilities, Chi Fortification, to make a barrier around himself. The girl doesn't seem to understand why she couldn't hit him but her grandfather does. The old man is shocked by Luo using a technique like the one he just did. Any kind of solid chi control is an ability only achieved by the Grand Masters respected by all martial artists. Bowing to Luo and shocking Shuang, he asks the young man's forgiveness. When Luo agrees to let it go, the old man thanks him and makes a request after introductions. He'd really appreciate if Luo could tell him why the painting is a fake. Luo accepts this request. Taking the painting from the old man into his hands, he does something that shocks the other two. He rips the whole painting to shreds. Quickly, he grabs 3 particular pieces of the painting and points out the brush strokes on them. Luo tells him that the way the strokes are placed and overlapped isn't even remotely human. This was made by a high-accuracy printing machine. The old man grips the painting's remains in fury at being tricked. Handing them over to what seems to be a bodyguard, he tells him to take it away. He is awed by Luo's skills though. Several appraisers swore by the genuineness of this painting but Luo could recognize its truth from a single glance. When the bodyguard brings out a long wooden box to place the painting in, Luo senses something strange within it. Seeing the young man's interest in it, the old man offers to give it to him if he wants. Luo is curious as to why this man would willingly give away a box of such unique make even if he can't sense the item inside it. Either way, he doesn't like to owe favors to other people. If the old man is going to give him the box, Luo will accept any one request from him as repayment. Surprisingly, he just pushes his granddaughter forward and asks Luo to take her as his disciple. While the girl panics and asks her grandfather what he's thinking, Luo sees something haunting. An image of his former, traitorous disciple standing behind Shuang. Upon seeing the image of his former disciple who broke both his trust and heart, Luo can only scream out a refusal. He asks that the old man please choose someone else. He'll take any disciple but just please not this girl. The sly old man is quick to remind Luo of what he just said before though. That he'll accept whatever request is made of him. Trapped by his own honor and pride, Luo caves in and accepts the request to make Shuang his disciple. He does have one condition though, she must never call him master, only teacher. When they finally arrive at their stop, Tongzhou Station, Luo separates from the two. Before this, they share contact info and ask to keep in touch. As Luo leaves, the old man and his granddaughter have a conversation of their own. He explains to her just how powerful of a man Luo must be and why he's decided to make connections with him. Hearing her grandfather's words, her own respect for Luo grows a great deal and she decides to obey his words. She won't leave any room for mistakes when dealing with her new teacher. Back with Luo, as he walks out of Tongzhou Station, he recalls a memory of his human life. An event that happened before he became emperor, but after this moment in the present, a bunch of men in suits beating him into the ground as their boss watches. When he finally meets Xiaomon and her mother, the mother's dislike for him is obvious at once. She doesn't want her daughter being with a poor low-class boy like him. On the car ride to their home, Xiaomon's mother makes several taunting remarks about Luo's financial and social status as a poor country boy. Meanwhile, Xiaomon is seen to be exchanging texts with another man. Arriving at Xiaomon's home, Luo meets her father, who he calls Uncle Zhang. The two are on much better terms than Xiaomon's mother, who seems like the complete opposite of her husband's character. Offering to help him with dinner, Luo enters the kitchen with Uncle Zhang. While Xiaomon's mother complains about both her husband and Luo being useless, a man in a suit arrives at the door. This man is none other than the one from Luo's memory at the train station. The man, Chen Xiao, calls out for Xiaomon to join him on a date he's scheduled, but she tries to make him leave. Her mother is quick to let him in, liking this young man much more than Luo due to his wealth. After all, Chen is already the owner of his own company at his young age. After gifting her some expensive perfume, he locks eyes with Luo. The man, at first, is intimidated by Luo's intense gaze but relaxes at Mrs. Zhang's words. She introduces Luo as just a college friend of Xiaomon from college who's come here from the countryside for a job. Hearing this, Chen goes ahead and writes Luo off as just some jobless loser. When he attempts to greet Luo, the boy simply turns back to the kitchen and says it's time to eat. This greatly offends Chen, who sees Luo as his lesser. In an attempt to both impress Xiaomon and show his superiority, he offers to give Luo a job at his company. He continues to subtly insult Luo's pride, resulting in him walking out of the room. As he feels smug over driving Luo away, a red light shines from the back of Chen's collar. Xiaomon follows Luo Chen outside. She insists that Chen Xiao is just a normal friend. Then, she begins talking about how in the modern world, people need proper funds to be together. Just love isn't enough. At the very least, he should be able to buy a house in Tongzhou for them. After brining up Chen's family wealth, she tells Luo that there's a way for him to afford a house for them. He just needs to sell his father's factory. As she says this, Luo remembers another memory like the one from the train station. Back when he lived through this life the first time around, he actually followed Xiaomon's advice. With his father's blessing, he used the man's entire life's work to buy a family house for himself and Xiaomon. When he went to show her the contract though, he was crushed by the sight of her in bed with none other than Chen Xiao. When Luo demanded to know why she would do such a thing to him and his father, Chen had some things beat him bloody. All while Xiaomon just stood at his side, watching it all happen with no hesitation. Since he's already lived through all that once, Luo knows better than to go along with Xiaomon's suggestions. He doesn't want to be the one to dump her just yet though, so he just stays a bit distant from her. He only answers her as shortly as possible and doesn't show any interest in the girl beyond what's necessary. As the two go to enter the Zhang home and finish dinner, Chen comes running out. As it turns out, Luo used some quiet chi control to cause a horribly upset stomach in Chen, to say the least. Something Mrs. Zhang had to suffer through quite painfully. Later, Luo leaves the house, again being distant with Xiaomon. Just as he steps out, he receives a text from his new disciple. Her grandfather has arranged a place for him to stay and she's coming to pick him up. Out on the street, Luo is bothered by a taxi driver who is desperate for a customer. When Luo refuses to hire him, the driver assumes he's poor and walks away, insulting Luo. Right then, Luo's disciple arrives in a luxury car to pick him up, shocking the driver silent. When she asks if she should deal with the man, Luo just smiles and says she doesn't need to. There are plenty of horrifying things in the world already. The cab driver isn't going to be alive for much longer. As Shuang watches, the driver seems to talk to the air and enter his taxi. Unknown to her, he's speaking to a terrifying ghost disguised as a pretty girl. Entering his taxi, she traps the driver in what will be his final drive. His disciple takes Luo to a high-class hotel and tells him of the arrangements made for him. Her grandfather has arranged a suite for him and the car they were in is for his use. Additionally, the Yi family which they belong to is ridiculously wealthy. Not only are they the richest around, they also have a huge amount of influence and dozens of companies under their ownership. As payment for his teachings, they're giving him ownership of a whole company. In a surprising turn of events, this happens to be the company Xiaomon works at, Tongzhou Media. After his disciple leaves, Luo heads to his room. At the door, he hears a man trying to force himself on a woman inside. Annoyed by the presence of others in his room, he slams open the door and enters. As the man inside begins yelling at Luo to get out, he simply walks inside and sits down on a sofa. Even as the man continues yelling at him, Luo simply relaxes back and begins lighting a cigarette. The woman in the room tries to signal for Luo to get out. She doesn't want him to be harmed in this situation. To both her shock and the man's rage, Luo simply sits back and blows smoke in the man's face. Enraged to his breaking point, the man picks up a wine bottle and prepares to smash it over Luo's head. As he's about to hit Luo, the woman he was trying to violate grabs on to stop him. Turning, she yells at Luo to run. As she does this, the man hits her and knocks her unconscious. Luo finally acts, grabbing the man by the collar and lifting him up. Even in his situation, the man shows a massive ego. He demands that Luo release him right now. This is his final warning. If he doesn't back off right now, he'll definitely have him killed by tomorrow. Right as he's making these threats, a yellow glow begins shining from Luo's hand. In just moments, the man's whole body is engulfed in a blazing fire that burns him to nothing more than ashes. Even those are quickly blown away. Later, the woman wakes up in the suite's bathroom, laying in the tub. When she yells out, Luo tells her to relax from outside the bathroom. When she asks what happened to Wang Xuan, the man from earlier, Luo simply tells her it's none of her business. He expects her to be gone in 15 minutes once the drugs in her system wear off. After leaving the bath, the woman makes a request of Luo. She would really appreciate if he'd let her stay here while she calls her assistant to come bring her some clothes. Handing her his phone, Luo points her towards the guest bedroom. He tells her to lock herself in there and not bother him while she waits to be picked up. As she goes into the room, Luo finally opens the box he got from the old man on the train. Inside, he finds a godly seed. Each of these seeds holds an imprint of a fallen ancient god. By consuming it, one can awaken to the divine state. If properly refined, it can even grant the heaven's eye, an ability that lets one see through anything. Ever since waking up in this time and body, Luo has been depending on the Emperor's scripture to maintain his strength. It will run out at some point though, so this seed is a real lifesaver. By using it to awaken, he'll be able to start restoring his cultivation and stop relying on the Emperor's scripture. Unfortunately, he can't do so just yet though. Due to not being stored properly, the seed has dried up and needs to be re-energized first. Then, the woman comes out and asks Luo if they can switch rooms. She's even willing to pay double the rent of the whole suite if he lets her. She claims to just be uncomfortable, but the truth is she's afraid that the man from earlier might return. If he does so, the guest room will be the first one he looks in and he'll find her. Amused by how obvious she is, Luo refuses. Deciding to try and charm the young man since she finds him handsome anyways, the woman begins coming on to him. She tells him she'll just have to sleep with him in his bed if he won't switch rooms, expecting him to fold. She sees him as a simple college student who's too shy to stand his ground in this situation. And thanks to the honorable character he's shown so far, she's not really worried about him doing anything shady either. To her surprise, Luo simply accepts and lays down to sleep. Shocked by this development, the woman decides she won't back down either and lays down. Due to their closeness and the complete awkwardness of the situation, neither of them end up getting much sleep. The next morning, he wakes to find a business card in the place where the woman slept. On it, her name is shown to be Lan Bayer, a famous actress. She's written her contact info and asked to let her pay for the room later. Luo simply smirks, finding this woman interesting. Dressing himself for the day, Luo checks out the contract that makes him the owner of Tongzhou Media. He decides to pay the company a visit.